So I believe in the last session, we discussed about some of the commands, like how to display the files. Then we discussed about group add, user add, where the passwords are stored, where the groups are stored, what is the importance of the wheel group, how you include primary groups, secondary groups, so that when you include a secondary group as wheel, then you have the privilege of using the sudo commands. It's been almost, I don't know, like 3 weeks, 4 weeks back, we discussed these things. And we started about the file permission changes, file group owner changes, how to manage them. So in this session, my goal would be to basically go over those management of the files, as you will have a lot of tools to do that, but it's always good to know from the terminal how you can manage those things. The reason being, Unix is so powerful that you can do a lot of scripting in order to automate your day-to-day activities as an administrator, as a developer, or whatever it is. So that being said, it's always good to understand at the command line base so that it becomes a foundational for you to go to the next step of automating your activities. Let's say every day morning you have certain set of things that you have to do, and those are like same set of commands, maybe with few parameter changes. You need to execute them on a daily basis to just get a snapshot of how your system look like, what is going on the system, how your application is behaving. Leave about the dashboards, but still you will like to understand what is happening today, like, and how you check your emails. In the same way, an administrator has to perform those activities so that he could be proactive. He knows what is the health. If something goes bad, he has a snapshot in his mind saying that, okay, I know today morning, this is how my system looks like. So something happened from that point forward. So in order to do those things, rather than typing those commands every day, if you know those commands on the command line interface, then you can script them so that you can just run that script by changing the arguments, and it will give you the output in a format or in a fashion that what exactly you're looking for. So to reach that point, we need to understand the commands. And so I will target some of the commands, keeping in mind for an administrator rather than more towards a developer standpoint. But of course, these are used for both, like managing the files, managing the permissions. Then how do you change the permissions? How do you search the files? How do you search for the contents inside the file? And how do you sort the files? How to traverse recursively? Then slowly I will take once those commands are done, I'll try to explain some of the commands related to how to display the hardware information, how to display the usage of the resource like CPU, like how much memory is being used. Then some of the performance monitoring commands like top. There are a few things that you have to know. Then tail, how to log, how do you view the contents of the file in a live, like a continuous format, like you follow the file each and every time an update happens. Then some process management commands. And based on the time, I will start the VI editor as well today so that you can navigate, you can open a file. How do you navigate through the file? How do you search for specific lines? How do you replace the files? How do you copy the files? And so on and so forth. So that's the main intention of today's class. I will try to keep it as short as possible, but yeah, based on the questions, based on what we are doing, sometimes I might get something in my mind and I can go some little bit deeper, but we'll see. So if you see in the last session, we tried to understand about the long listing of the files in Unix. There is something called, how do you list the files? You just say ls, then you get the files, but files and folders, when I say files, because everything is a file in Unix. But the problem is it does not differentiate whether it's a file, whether it's a directory, and who is the owner of this file. So in order to do that, you need to do a long listing. That's why you say -L. Then it gives the long listing. It gives some information saying that, okay, permissions information, then how many links it has, then who are the owners, who is the group, then size, then month, then day, then the time at which it created, then the folder or the file, the name of the file basically. So here, if you look at the first character you see is D, means a directory. Now, if it is hyphen, it's a file. That's how you can differentiate. But apart from that, there are few things that you need to understand. There is sometimes you will see capital S and some other special characters, which we will do later. It's called sticky bit and GUIDs, which are special permissions where it says, oh, okay, only root can perform these activities, even though it's a file that's visibility. Then followed by permission set. In permission set, the first three are for the user, then the next three are for the group, then the remaining three are for the others, like people who are not part of that group, what they can do, whether they can see, whether they can execute, what all they can perform, whether they can modify. Now, let's say I want to change the permissions, I want to change the ownership. So in order to do any changes to the ownership of the file, you should have access to that file. Okay, so now how do you know whether you have access to that file? So let me, as I said, the permissions are for user as you, then group, then others. The notation is what we use as U for user, G for group, O for others, but in lowercase. So here, if you see, we see in other things that you need to understand is in Unix, when we say R implies read, then write, X is execute. Now here, when I said user, RWX means user has full permissions on this file or a folder. It means he can read, he can write, he can execute. For group, it says R-X, which means he can perform read, but he cannot write anything to it, but he can execute any files within the directory. And the same logic applies for others as well. Others can read the contents, they can execute if it is an executable file like a C program, like a Python program, or an PySpark program, Java program, whatever it is, but he cannot update because there is no write permissions. He can view, he can execute. Now, how do you control this? In order to control this, you need to use a command called chmod, like modify the permissions. But how do you modify them? How do you modify specific to your user, specific to your group, and specific to your owner? How can you control? So there are two ways this can be done. It's called notations, like via symbols, which is basically like read, write, execute. And there's another notation. It is basically called octal notation. Octal notation basically drives everything based on a number called 7, which is derived by 1, 2, 4. Yeah, 1, 2, 4. So in computers, we all know the number game is just between these two, 0 and 1. However, here 0 means no permissions. 1 means assigned, permissions are assigned. Okay. Now, with respect to the octal notation, when I said 7, 1, 2, 4, which let me do this. So I said 0 means no permission, let's say none. Then 7 means you get all permissions, which means read, write, and execute. This is in terms of octal notation, because with symbols, you all know R means read, W means write, X means execute. Then if you are able to give all the permission, then how do I control only read or write or execute? So in order to control that, I will say one means execute. Okay. Then two means write. Then four means read. Now you could say like how 4 in octal to binary gets notated. I mean, you can do that decimal to binary conversion, then you will know how that 010101 gets reverted back, but I don't want to go that deeper, but that's how it relates to. Now, by doing additions of 1, 2, and 4, you get 7, which means you have all permissions like 4 plus 2, 6, 6 plus 1, 7. For instance, if you want to just give read and write, means what should be the number? 6. If you want to just give execute permission, then the octal notation 1 says you'll get only execute permission. If you want to just give read, then you have to say 4. So it's like magic number that you have to remember. So if you want to give more than 1, you need to just add them. If you want to give all, just add all these 3. If you want to just give execute and read, just 4 plus 1 is 5. Okay. Now we will see in action how that gets updated. Okay. Now again, as I said, you have user, you have group, you have others. So a user will have both 1, 2, 4, means he has all permissions. In the same way, a group can also be assigned with either 1 or 2 or 4 or combinations of them. In the same way, for others also, same logic gets applied. So it means when you're giving the command, the first position will for the user, then followed by group, then followed by others. Now let's say here I have a file called test. Maybe I'll create a file. So in Unix, there is another command called touch for if you want to create any file, so that it creates a 0 bytes file. For demos, usually we use that. So if I say touch, I will say test.c or my program 1.c. Okay, now I have my program, and by seeing this, I know it has read and write, but no execute permissions. Now, if I want to assign an execute permission with respect to octal notation, I will say ch mode. Now, execute is 1. I will say 1. Then I want to give read and execute permissions for my group as well. It means 4 plus 1, 5. 5. And for others, I don't want to give any permissions. And if I say my program, and if I say now, I have execute 1, 5 is read and execute, then others is 0. Here dash means you do not have any permissions. First hyphen is a file. The second one, I said I need only execute permission. So now as a user as well, I cannot change the file. The user cannot change the file. However, others can read and execute the file. No, sorry, group can read and execute the file. Others cannot perform anything. Now let's see, if I say, what it says, permission denied, right? Now, if I want to type the contents of the file, usually you can say cat, it will display the contents of the file, permission denied. The reason being, even though I am a user, I set my permissions only to execute, but I cannot do beyond that. I'll change my permissions. I want to get all permissions. I'll say 7. Now if you list, I have all permissions. Read, write, execute. My group has read and execute. Of course, other than who are not part of that group has nothing. Now, as soon as I gave execute permissions, if you see in you see this green, I think it's an mobile X term, which is trying to differentiate between an executable program was a regular file, and in the same way for folders it's showing as blue. But the technical way to understand whether it's an folder or a file or an executable is basically based on the permissions and based on the character that you see at the first of the list. Now, if I want to do with symbols, now I know, okay, with octal, which is clean, but if I want to perform the same thing with the symbols, the way it goes is chmod. So here, there are 3 characters that you need to understand where we call it as for symbols notation, what we use is A means give it for all, then U means user, then G means group. So for instance, if I say chmod, for all, give, read, write, execute my program. Now if I say everyone has full permissions. Now if I want to remove, you just minus. If you list, now no one can do anything. So if you want to just say, let's read w plus x list, read, execute, read, execute, read, execute. No one has write. And if you want to have full permissions for just the user, now if I list, so for user, it has all, and then remaining permissions are as it is, which are untouched because they have read and execute permissions. So, which is now, it's all well and good. Now there is a situation where you need to change the owner, change the group. Then we use a command called like change ownership. Earlier was change the modes of the file, the permissions, chmod. Now here we use a command called chown. Now we all know the user and the group, like what we discussed in the previous session. So what I would say is change owner. If I want to change this owner of this file to root, change owner, root, group, user followed by group, and my program.c. Okay. See now, root and root. So now you see the owner of the file is changed to root and root. I mean, general use case in which scenario you use this is basically when you're trying to copy files from one user group to other user group, or moving files from one system to other system, and you want to take the ownership of those files. Then usually this is what you are going to perform, like you have to change the ownership. Now, one thing you would have noticed why I have used the sudo, because you are trying to change the ownership to a user which you are not owner of, which are not part of that group, and hence you have to use the sudo command where the super user can perform those activities. Now, in the same way, if you, let's say, maybe I will go to a folder. And if I say, I have 3 files. Okay. Now, if I want to change the ownership of all the files, then basically I would execute the same command, but I will say star. Okay. Now you see all the owners are changed. For instance, if I have another directory called what? Oh, I am in the same directory. Okay. Oh, it's already copied. Okay. So now, okay, good. Now I have few more files in the subdirectory. I'll create few more files. Touch prog4 dot. If I want to change the ownership recursively, means all the files, and it should navigate to the subfolders inside the subfolders and do the necessary changes for the ownership. And the way you could do is ch on, you say -r. Now, if you go to the subfolder and you say earlier it was having all as, hey, with some HKS username and a group, now it became root and root. And the same logic applies for changing the file permissions as well. For instance, if I want to change the file permissions of all these files and files within the subfolder, what I have to do is chmod. I'll say 755, like user should have full permissions, on group should have read and execute, other should have, maybe I will say 1, only execute permissions. So -r recursively for everything. Now the owner, some of the files are root, right? So me as a owner, as a user, cannot touch other users' files. So I will say sudo. Okay, sorry, capital R 751. Now if you see, all the group has execute, others has execute, but the user has full permissions. If you go to subdir, now because who am I? HKS. I do not have read permissions. I have only execute permissions, and hence I cannot list as well because I'm not root. The subdir owner is root. So I have to say sudo -l. Now I can see the files. So that's how you can control who can read, who can write, who is the owner, how to change the ownership and all those things. These are really pretty useful commands for an administrator, because when you're trying to copy the files, when you're unzipping the files, you are trying to install an application as an application owner, user who you are not, because they are non-interactive users. When you create an application user, application group, usually you don't need to log in as that user and perform the activity. You can perform the activity as a regular user, that what you have logged in, then set the permissions so that people cannot log in as that application user. On top of it, that application user can run as if it is running as that user. That's how you can manage these controls. And again, either you can take the approach of symbols to perform the changes to the access, or you can use the octal notation. Technically, I'm more comfortable using the octal notation rather than the symbol, but it's up to you. Both does the same thing. There is no hard rule says that, okay, you have to use symbols or you have to use basically octal notation. Okay. So now changing the permissions, changing the ownership is one part. And now how do you search the files? How do you navigate through the files? How do you find for files? You know that, okay, there is some content, but you don't know the file name and you don't know where that file is as well. Sometimes you know the file name, but you don't know where it is. Yeah, that's one scenario. Another scenario is you know the contents, you remember that, but you don't know the name and you want to search. So there are two ways that we can do. First, we'll try to use some basic search using ls command, and then we will use another command called grep, which can be used to say, oh yeah, I know the content, but I want to identify the file name. And then we'll use another command called find as well. So three things: ls, find, and grep. We'll concentrate on these three things. Ls, we all know to list the list the files. So long listing. Okay, because now I'm not the owner, so I can't even do that. Let me change the ownership back to me. Sudo recursively for now I am back. My ownership I received. Now if I say cd, okay, I have some files in this. I have some shell scripts, sh. Maybe I'll have some C programs, Python programs within this. Now, if I want to know, if I want to list all the files in certain order, like I want to list all this based on an alphabetical order, you just say ls minus l. It is going to list the files within alphabetical order by default, A to Z, ascending order. Now, if I want to display in the reverse order, you just say R. Good. But if you want to display basically sort by time, you just say T. And if you want to display the files in the reverse order of the time, just say R. Now, in what scenario you use this? You want to display the latest file on the top, or you want to display the latest file at the bottom, based on the nature of the logic that you're trying to search for will display. Now, since I have very less files here, you are not seeing the scroll, but it's easy to say what is top and what is bottom. But if you have more number of files, then top one will scroll up on the console. So that's why you see reverse order, so that the latest can be displayed at the bottom, so that's easy for you to navigate. But how can you control that? So you can control that as well using more. So if you use, probably let me go into a folder where I have many files, maybe source, cd/etc. Okay, good. Now if I say ls minus lt, meaning I'm sorting by time, But if I want to sort the reverse order, you see it changes. The latest is at the bottom. Or if you want, what you could do is more. So it will basically give you an option to see screen by screen, like page by page. Now, if you use a space bar, it scrolls by page. But again, you cannot go back. Okay, this is one way of having a control on, because when you are in a graphical user interface, you can use your mouse scroll up and down, but technically you are in a character user interface. So how do you control that scroll? Of course, here you have the tool, you can scroll up and scroll down and see, but this also has a limitation of a buffer. When you are on an tool like MobiXterm or PuTTY session, SSH session, there is a buffer limitation and you cannot go beyond certain period of buffer to up. So you can use this more. Now, if now, which is ls minus ltr. Now, if you want to target only a specific type of files, then you could say ls minus l star dot c maybe, or star dot conf. Then it will list all the files which are ending with conf. Technically speaking, in Unix, there is no significance for dot. If you remove this, you'll get all the files with conf as well. The reason being, in Unix, this is never considered as an extension. Everything is a file name. In the same way here, the notation says dot period by extension, but technically in Unix, there is no significance. A directory is also like a file, and this is also just like a regular file. Okay. Now, let's say you want to search for conf files within subdirectories and directories and subdirectories. By default, list minus L is going, is navigating into the folders and displaying the files as well for me here. If you see dconf, gconf. Okay. Now, so another command I was saying is find, right? So using find as well, you can find the files. There is another command other than find as well, which is very quick and easy to remember, called locate. But the problem with locate is all the directories and subdirectories that you are trying to search for should be part of that index. Locate is a default command that is provided as a part of the Linux distribution, but it doesn't. But the limitation of this locate is you have to update that index file to include what are all the folders that you are trying to search for. It will search only in those indexed locations, and anything that you are trying to search outside that location, it will say basically file not found. And hence locate may not be a good example for files or the directories that you're downloading or copying from some other location. So we'll use find. I'll say find. I want to find everything from this point forward, including subdirectories and directories. But what you're trying to find, I'll say name star.c. Okay. It gives me, so inside source folder, there is a directory called vbbox, blah, blah, blah. Inside this, there's another folder, and you have a file called thread2r linux.c. But how do you display who is the owner? What are the permissions of this? Then you append with list. You get who is the owner, how many links it has, group, size, when it is created, so on and so forth. And it gives the entire location of the file. Now, I want to change the permissions of this file, or the owner of this file, or the group of this file. Because I know I have these many files, but each and every file is present in its own subdirectory, and subdirectory. I cannot go to each and every file and change them, but I want to give execute permissions. Let's say, of course, by default, so let's say I want to remove execute permissions. I want to have user has the full permissions, others have just read permissions. How can I control that? Because they are not part of some specific file or a folder. So what you could do is use this command, then you can execute chmod 7 for user full permissions. For others, I want only execute. So execute is 1 for group. Probably for group, I will say read and execute. Read is 4, execute is 1. So 4 plus 1 is 5. Sorry, 7, 5. And for others, I don't want to give anything. Then, so this is the syntax followed by plus. Plus means if I have 1,000 files, I am saying do not execute this command for 1,000 times. Just run this command only once by appending all the files in one shot. Now,
so one comment here on Naveen, don't change the command. So just a review and one comment on it. So what you're saying here is with the find, you're finding all the files which have extension C, and then minus ls is to list
no, I
those
should not
files.
list. I should remove this file. I mean, if you want to execute, just remove this list.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that's where my confusion was. Can you also list as well as execute? So you're saying you can do only one thing at a time.
One thing at a time, yes.
So minus ls is for listing.
Listing.
And if you don't want to list, but you want to run some execute, then you do this.
Execute.
Okay. So remember one thing, I must have, Naveen must have mentioned it last time. In Linux, when you're typing these commands, by default system itself is not going to ask you confirmation saying, are you sure you want to delete this file? Because in Linux, we just expect every single person to know what they're doing. Meaning if you're running this chmod, it is going through the entire system, changing permissions for several thousand files. We expect that you know what you're doing. So it's not going to ask you confirmation. Now, with this kind of command, remember that it can affect like 2 files in the system or 10,000 files. It doesn't matter. It is going to just apply the changes. Now imagine you're executing a delete command instead of chmod command. So again, system is not going to ask you for confirmation. So in Linux, just make sure you know what you're doing, and system is not going to care for your command. It's just going to run it. Okay. Any comments, Naveen? I think that is a very important thing we have to remind when working with Linux kernels.
Exactly. So when you're executing a command, it thinks, yes, you are asking me to do it. It does not say, are you sure you want to do again? Unless there are certain special commands for which it will try to ask. For example, you are running kernel updates because they are more critical in nature, and hence it says, okay, you want to really do it or not. But of course, there are flags that you can pass to override, like why to say by default accept everything. And in Unix, remember, there are alphabets like R means recursive. Okay, there is something called F means force. So they are same for any command. Those flag values are same for any command that you try to execute. The significance does not change. Just to keep it simpler and makes easy for us to remember the things. Now, if I say the list now, I believe I executed this command. Yes. So if I say list, now you see the permissions are changed. Owner has a full, others have read and execute, group has read and execute, others have nothing. Now, how do you revert back? Simple. If you want to know the revert back, you need to know what the permissions are. What were the earlier permissions? Read, write, execute full for user. What did the group has? Read and execute. Others also had read and execute. How you want to revert back? Just execute the same command, same permissions. it reverts back. So if you list, then they are back. Okay. Now to change the ownership, the same logic. If you want to change the ownership, instead of chmod, you would say ch1. If I want to change the ownership, probably to root, then I have to use the command called sudo, because I do not have permission to assign something to the root. Maybe let me see if I have any user cat / etc student 3, student 5. So let's use student 1. Okay, maybe he was not part of the group. What was the group? Okay. So still I cannot do, I can do only by sudo because it's a different user. Now if you list, part of the group HKS. So student 1, 3, and 5, I think they all belong to the same group. Good. That's how you can manipulate. I mean, for entire folder, it's a global, then you don't need to use find command. You can directly use recursive, but selective only for specific set of files, specific pattern files. I mean, this is a wildcard. You can say all files starting with A followed by anything ending with .c. Then it will apply only for that. So anything that is specific to a pattern, then you can apply this logic. Now, there are, let's say now you want to find some files. Let me go to one. Yeah, I'm good. Now, if you want to find all files modified in last 24 hours, there's something called mtime. I'll say find from my current directory recursively -m time -1. I mean 1 day list. All these files I touched today modified, right? If you want to know the real characteristics of this, what you could do is you say, I think stat is the command, and you specify this file name. It gives, yes. So this is the file, the size, then what are the access permissions, then when it was accessed, when it was modified, when it was changed.
Naveen, can we explain one more thing here? Just do file and the file name.
Yeah, it gives exactly. So if you want to know what type of a file is a binary file or an ASCII file, then you can say file followed by this. It says dynamically linked file. If I say .sh, let's see. Now you'll know the difference. An ASCII text file. It means human can read anything that is binary. It gives what kind of a binary file it is.
So going back to that stat command, right? Just notice that it tells you a lot of details about when that file was modified.
True.
There are 3 date timestamps attached to it. One is when was it accessed last time, modified, and changed. So you do have a lot of details attached to the file. It tells you how many blocks it is occupying on the disk, where exactly on which device it is sitting, the file. And also it tells you, I mean, here it is not showing you the birth. That is, birth is the date timestamp when it was created.
Yes. Yeah, I noticed this, like when you copy folders from one location to other location for a downloaded file or from some different server, sometimes it does not do it. The birth is signified only at the time on the source system, I think. I haven't done much investigation there, but sometimes I don't see that file birth details.
Yeah, you can do a very simple test by creating one touch in the temp
Yeah,
folder
I think
and
I
then check
have
the
this
stat.
file. Yes. Yeah. So I have this file, right? So if I go back, we have this my program. So if I say, oh, still it does not. Anyways, this is something we have to see, investigate, and in the next class we can discuss about it. Now here though, if you want to change, so let me explain one other beauty of touch command. Touch, I said you can create a 0 bytes file, right? Let's say if I say touch a.txt, if I list, see, it's a 0 bytes. It's 0 bytes, right? But if I want the touch, the beauty of touch is, let's say I have a file called myprogram.c, but if I want to change the timestamp of that file, it could be past or it could be future. I can do that using touch, not the permissions or the group change or anything. We saw how to change the owner. We saw how to change the permissions, but at the same time, we can change the timestamp of the program of a file as well. Let me recollect. Touch, if I am not wrong, the way it goes is year 2021, then followed by month and day, like 08. We had is 15, right? Maybe I will say 14. Hours, minutes, seconds, probably I will say 09 hours, 23 minutes, 12 seconds. My program. Now if I say, my program 1.c, okay, because I am not the owner. See, owner is root. So let's say sudo. Now if I say ls minus l, my program 1.c, wow, it changed. No, it did not. So something I'm missing. My bad. When I say sudo touch, it created a file with this number because I'm not specifying what is the significance of that. So I believe minus t. Let me recollect. Probably, yeah, it should. That is correct. Minus c probably. Let me see. Year, month, date, hours, minutes, maybe dot. Yes. Now, if I say list, see August 14, 923. So you can change. Now I'm going backward, right? You can go forward as well. If I say 23, if I list 2023, I don't remember the limit. I believe you can go like, let's see, 2035 or 38. I don't remember that number. 2023, right? Let me say 2040 or 2050. Oh, 2038 is the limit. You cannot go beyond that. Now, I don't know why that limit is, but anyways, something to remember. So Jan 18, 2038, I cannot go beyond that. So this is the maximum time that you can go or that you can change forward. January 18, 2038, no matter whatever number I gave, see here, I said 2050, August 14, it did not take it. It just set it to Jan 18, 2038. So this is the max forward limit that you can go for. Now, why you want, again, like if you want to try a few things, you want to test your program. You want to say, you wrote a program to delete all the files which are 10 days older. Now, how do you test it? You cannot just wait 10 days and say, okay, now run my program, right? So this is how you can test. You can create all the files with 10 days older and see how your program is behaving. That's how this is useful. So find, touch, list, and let's see something about grep. Any questions? Probably. Let's do the grep as well now.
Yeah, one note, Naveen. So when we are writing, so you see how you wrote the touch command without the flag -t, and then you didn't realize that you're creating two files.
Yeah.
So remember to have your flags in place. Like if you're deleting something, and if you forgot to put a flag, it might delete a wrong file. So always remember to have flags. And as I said in the past, right, if you're typing some command, just before giving enter key, make sure what you typed is correct. Otherwise, it can just have bad effects.
Adverse effects, yes. So, I mean, for changing the permissions, one thing you remember that, oh, it was easy because what were the old permissions? What were the new permissions? Reverting back is easy. But let's say you're deleting the files. It does not ask for confirmation. You cannot restore it back. For delete, what you could do is you can say interactive, like -i. For example, let's say I have this file, right? I want to delete this file. I'll say for delete, it's not like that, like remove file, provide this file. It's removed. Now, if I want to restore, sorry, it's not that easy at this point. But what you could do though is you can say interactive mode -i, it'll ask. Right? Now, just for one file, it does not make any sense. But if you are deleting a directory and files inside a directory with certain pattern, then you can use this interactive file. Maybe it gives you an opportunity. Good is, yes, it is asking for a confirmation. Bad is, if you're trying to delete 100 files, you have to say 100 times why. So it's plus and a minus. So it all depends on the circumstances on which you are working and how control you want to have and what you need to do. Even though you said, I want to delete certain pattern specific files, but you want to review them before you delete and decide whether you want to delete or not, then use the -i, like an interactive. You'll spend some time, but you are more cautious. Okay. So you have those options. So now how do you remember all these things? It's all by practice. And the best thing is, man, I said interactive, but basically it's prompting before every removal. -f, force, it forces, it never prompts. Okay, so there are, and one more thing, actually, I should have explained this when I'm explaining the recursive. In recursive, small r and capital R has a significance. For some of the commands, both have the same meaning, because when I'm trying to say chmod -r, it was saying bad command, because small r has no significance there, capital R has the significance. But chown, capital R has a significance and small r probably has no significance. So I directly used capital R. So if you are not sure what it is, just go to the man page and you can see them what exactly it does. Okay. Man is the best tool if you want to really learn. The reason being, you are searching for your flag, and at the same time you will understand what are the other flags, significance, and everything. You will read them. I believe in the man page they provide examples at the end. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't say. Yeah, but not with every flag though. So you should play around. Now let's say you want to search for text inside the files and know where those what those file names are. So probably I will go to VB box maybe because it has some good example files. And so maybe let me see cat. Let's search for something called Python 2, right? So I will say grep is the command. It's like global regular expression pattern. What you want to search for? I want to search for something called I copied already Python 2 search. And you see in routines.sh, you see this file. And in routines.sh, you see Python 2 in second occurrence as well. But if you want to know the line number as well and do a recursive, what you can say is -r recursive and n will provide the number. See the line number. So you know that, okay. Now, another example of usage of this grep is you have multiple log files. Okay, you do a log rotation, you have like 10 days of file, 20 days of file, or 2 months of file, and you are trying to search for a specific error message in all those files, and you want to know in which line number they are. This is another way you can search for, rather than Python, probably would say null pointer exception or ORA dash something or whatever those error message are, like error. And if you search, you see in this file, these many occurrences, it has that error. That gives that entire file, the line as well. Nice. It's really useful command, this grep, when you're trying to do some investigation on certain analysis, or you're trying to perform some analysis on, okay, what went wrong, how many times this occurred, and all those. Then what else I can do with the grep? I'm just thinking. Now, let's do some details about system info. Like, you want to know what is this kernel information, the version where you are, you say. Uname. It'll give you the which version of Linux you're running, so on and so forth. It gives the details. Okay. If you just say uname, it gives a brief. It just says a Linux machine. If it is Ubuntu, maybe it says Ubuntu. If it says Red Hat, it might say Red Hat, but most of the times it says Linux because we are on flavor of CentOS, which is underneath Red Hat libraries. Now, if you want to know the release, I believe it is still same cat/etc Red Hat release. You'll see the release. CentOS Linux release 8.4.2105. Now, if you want to know how many hours, how many days my system is up and running, here you say uptime. It gives me from what time it has been up and how many users are connected. But if you want to know when was it last reboot, it gives me that history. Pretty cool, right? These are really nice commands that are available. Then if you want to know the host name, it's the same, Windows or Unix. Host name, this is my host name. Then if you want to know the date, just say date. If you want to know the calendar, I think it is cal. Yeah, calendar, yes. So in find, again, in Unix, and I mean, not even just find command, let me step back. In Unix, it's case sensitive. If I say star.c, it means it searches only for lowercase c. It does not search for these type of files. That means you have to do twice, but if you want to ignore such case, you can say -i. So if I say find anything from here with the names starting with star.zip, but it could be a capital zip or lowercase zip, then I will say ignore. Okay. And say enter. There's nothing. That's not fair. Maybe star.c. Yeah. There are files. Now you see this. If I say capital C, and if I remove this, probably there would not be anything. That's why you don't get anything. But most of the times it's lowercase for the program files extension. What else? I'm just thinking what else I can think of for the find. I think we're pretty much good with the find, and we saw some commands related to system info. Let's do some hardware info, like how many CPUs you have, what is your memory, how much free space, how much disk space, and how much space each folder is occupying. So if you want to know your CPU info, the best place for any hardware information is called .proc. So cat/proc CPU info. Get all this information. Now you see the beauty of the commands. You want to grep only for certain thing, like probably you want a processor. So how you would do though? Pipe. You can pipe the output of this as an input to other command. Wait, I did a mistake. Grep. They have two processors. And if you want to do so let me, if you want to do the count, I mean, since it is two by human nature, I know, yeah, it is two. But let's say you have this long list scrolling with a different large number of lines, right? If you want to get that count, you pipe that. I mean, you basically send this output as an input to another command using the pipe. I will say wc-l line count 2. So now in the same way, if you want to know the memory info, cat/proc mem info, and gives the memory info. Total memory, total free, available, so on and so forth. And if you want to know what are the other things that are available, just say proc, list the files there. By reading them, I might also don't know many of them. So you can see USB info, disk info. There are a lot of things that you can see. Maybe I will say star info. I don't know what is bud info, CPU info, mem info, page types, virtual memory allocations. I think I don't have any USBs assigned to it. That's why it's not saying, or else it'll give me the USB info, like number of USB ports that are available. But anyways, that's where you can do some exploration to understand what they are. Now, if you want to know the size of this folder, you say du disk uses, just say this folder name. It gives, right? But if you want to know only the summary, for each and every file, it is giving the size. U-S. If you say H, like human readable, most of the times H is human readable, 19 MB. Let's say you copied this folder from one location to other location. Now you want to compare, you can use this command. size now 19 MB, go to the source and see 19 MB, good. At least you get some confidence that, okay, I'm not missing anything. Okay. Now, if you want to see the entire disk capacity, then it's called disk free. But again, -H, human readable. How much is used, how much is free, what is the total size, so on and so forth. Now here, disk free, grep, you are looking only for one specific thing, like one specific mount point, maybe say as BA1. Oh. No, it's yes, DA1. What else I plan for? And let me do some basics on the performance monitor. Like you want to know what is being running on your machine. Like task manager, yes, like task manager. Wait. Top. It gives what are the top running processes on your machine. And it gives a summary on the top, like how much memory, how much CPU is being used. What is a swap space? We discussed about swap space also in previous class, like page files, how much is being used, how much is free. It just gives you an history of the load that is there on your machine. And for each process wise, it gives you the list. In Unix, each and every running item is a process. And for each and every process, there is an ID associated, which is called PID, like process ID. It gives the process ID, who is the user of which is running. See, top command is being executed by user called HKS. And what is PID? So if you see the top command, PID is 6143. If you want to kill that, I will say kill that process ID. Here I see this process ID raised. HK, the command is running, and if I kill that, it's dead. See, it's gone. Here, if you want to gracefully kill, you this. And sometimes kill will not kill the process. Maybe the process is more stronger, then you use force. How do you use? Not F though, here is a -9, like -9. It will forcefully kill that process. Like there could be some zombie processes which are running and you don't know what it is, then this is the way you can identify those processes and kill them. Now you want to target only for specific processes that are running. Here, it's very tough, right? Because it's keep changing. The reason is it always gives the top used on the, the most highly used CPU process will be always on the top. That's why it's called top, which is using more resources of the application or the system. But if you want to do that, what you could say is PS. PS EF gives all the list. Now you can say grep Java, anything that is running for Java, or anything that is running as probably, let me run the top here. Now come here and grep for top. Now you know the paid, and you can kill that if you want to. This is another way to find or search for a specific process that is running. If you have an Java web server running, then Oracle running, then you have Node.js running, and you have running some Apache, you have Tomcat, and or any Java process, then you can search for those processes using this PS command. And then if you think that that is hung or for some reason it is not responding, then you can get that PID and kill that PID. One way, first try to kill it gracefully. And if it still does not respond, then use the force kill. Okay. Some basic things about the process management and performance monitoring. Now, let's say you want to view the contents of a file. We are keep using cat command, right? But the problem is you do not have much control on the cat. It just displays on the screen, even though you have more, but you still cannot navigate. What you could do is you can use a few other commands like less and more. Okay. If I say, let me go to VB VirtualBox, trying to find some file. Okay. If I say routines.sh, yes, and I can go up, I can go down, and you can search. You want to search for maybe for, let's say, Java, let's see, nothing. That's for error. Yeah, see, wherever error is there, it is highlighting. Then if you want to basically go to the next page, like page by page, you use space bar. Okay, if you shift space bar, it scrolls up page by page. Space bar, it scrolls page down, like a page down. Now it's end of the file. Okay, now quit is Q. The reason why you use less is basically you do not want to tamper the file. At the same time, you want to search for contents within that file and you want to view that file. Like less, there is another command called more. It's similar. I don't see any difference. But only problem with the more is I believe you cannot navigate. You cannot use up arrow or down arrow to navigate line by line, and you cannot search for, I believe you cannot search. Let's see, I will say, yeah, you cannot search as well. It's only to view the contents, not more than that. So I don't see more usage of the more command. Instead, I use most of the times less. Now, what is the significance of less? I mean, this command says it will not load the entire file in the memory when you're trying to open. Page by page, it loads the stuff into the memory. So if you have 4 GB file or like a 6 GB file, if you want to open, you cannot do that using editor tools because it's going to load that file into the memory, which takes more time. That's why these tools are helpful. So each and every time you navigate to the page, it brings that chunk of the file into the memory, so that it's easy for you to get into it. Another way to view the file is editor, like view. You can say view and you can specify that file name. Here you can do that. Much more powerful nature of this views. You can say like line numbers also. You set nu, you can see the line numbers, and you can search. For example, you are searching for just like what you did, maybe Python. Say Python, and you just keep typing n, so it navigates wherever Python is there. It navigates. If you say shift n, it navigates backwards. Okay. Some useful tools which are useful, and you say colon Q, it will quit. Then another way is tail command. Just to see the last X number of entries, like last 10 entries, last 50 entries, last 20 entries. You just say tail dash, like hyphen. Sometimes people say minus, hyphen, dash, whatever it is, it's the same. Dash 10 routines.sh. You'll see last 10 lines. It would, I mean, it does not make any sense for displaying last 10 lines of a program, but last 10 lines of an log file. I think let's say /var log messages. Yes. So if I say file last 10 lines of my var log messages. Okay. So now, oh. Wait. Why it says on? Yes. Sorry, I was typing wrong password. See, I see the last 10 lines of the messages. Now, if I want to follow the file, like each and every time the log get appended, I want to keep seeing that content. You just say dash, and last 10 lines or last 15 lines or whatever it is, just F. Each and every time some contents get appended, it will just keep displaying here. So that's why it is waiting. If something gets appended, it will show. Let's do some activity. Hopefully, if I delete some files, it writes there. I'll say my program. Oh, it's not there. M program. Okay. So I was listing my program. Nothing. Let's see what that's. I'm just trying to understand how var log messages.
So that one will record any system related
System.
updates,
Yeah. See
that
this.
kind
Yeah.
of stuff. Yeah,
Exactly. See, I logged out. As soon as I logged out, it recorded. Session 6 scope logged out. So each and every time an activity happens. Now, let's say I'll just give some gap. I'll try to log in. Hopefully, we get some activity. Log out as well. So I'm just generating some activity so we can see that. Yep. New session and session removed. Both. Log in and log out. Okay. So that's how it is useful. If you want to just monitor a log file, like what is happening, then you can use this tail command with -f, like follow, and do just watch it basically. How often you use it all depends on like what you're trying to debugging. Like now you want to debug something is happening in production, you're trying to simulate within your test environment or in sandbox. Now sessions are browser, people are logging in, logging out, and you want to see what's happening, or people are performing some transactions. I mean, for var log messages, that's where you see, but application log will be your application.log file. There you can go and monitor like Cassandra cluster log files, or it could be any log file, any ASCII log file. I mean, if you are trying to tail something and non-ASCII file, then it's pretty hard to identify what it's trying to print though.